All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. My name is Morgan Sullivan. I lead content and editorial at Transcend, and I'll be moderating this session on AI that strengthens bonds and bottom lines. Joining me on stage is the incredible Aimee Cardwell. Aimee, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Hi, folks. I am the CIO in residence for Transcend. It's a position that allows me to chat with our customers and potential buyers and talk about how these tools that we sell can work within your environment. So it's a rare position, but one that allows me to meet with a lot of people in the marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, our panel today is about AI. I think one thing that happens with AI is that the language is very grandiose, it's very theoretical. So, what we wanted to do today was bring it back down to earth a little bit and center our conversation around one use case. It's a use case that I think, similar to AI, is on the minds of a lot of people here today, and that use case is GLP-1s.
Yep.
So, we'll dive right in. Aimee, when you think about the GLP-1 patient journey, walk us through what that looks like from a consent and data and communications perspective.
Great. I'm actually going to walk you through it from two different perspectives. One of them is the perspective of the pharmaceutical company, and one of them is the perspective of the healthcare provider. So pharmaceutical companies nowadays are working to create more direct relationships with their patients, as many of us know. And one of the ways they do this, and I'm actually a GLP user myself, I do microdose GLPs, is they offer a coupon. Because by offering a coupon, that gives you an incentive to sign up, and then that gives them a direct relationship with you. And that's really important because they're building a direct-to-consumer database from scratch. So if you think about what their data landscape looks like, their data landscape is as clean and fresh as a newborn, as a freshly fallen snow on the East Coast, right?
It's the dream.
Exactly, it's a dream situation. They're starting from scratch. They have a beautiful data set. If you look at a healthcare provider, so generally, well, in the past, the pharmaceutical companies never had a direct relationship with the patient because the healthcare provider was in the middle. So then
Right.
You're thinking, well, why doesn't the healthcare provider do more engagement with their patients? And the reason is because their data landscape is incredibly fragmented. They have data from acquisitions. They have data that's about your insurance plan over here. They have data about your previous visits over here. And so it's really difficult for them to create an engagement model with the patient. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's something that we see across many industries, but in healthcare especially. So, in that journey you just described, there are so many engagement opportunities, but in this fragmented data landscape, like, what can break down when these health systems or providers go out and try to activate those engagement opportunities? Or put another way, like, what needs to be true for them to activate those opportunities effectively?
Yeah. So let's use a consent event, right? So I just mentioned that the pharmaceutical company would offer you a coupon. In order to get the coupon, you have to sign up. That's a consent event. It's an opportunity for you to say, I'm going to give you my data in exchange for this thing, and here are the things that you can use that data for. So come back to the healthcare provider, and let's say they had a consent event. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, that I was recently prescribed a GLP, and they said, would you like me to remind you once a week when it's time for you to give yourself the injection? That would be a consent event. I could say yes. And if the answer was yes, then suddenly something is happening and they can update some of my records. But remember, I said that the data landscape of the healthcare provider is really diffuse and dispersed. So they got a yes from me. Great. Where are they going to record that yes?
Right.
So now they've got all these different data sets, and the idea of updating each one of those pieces of data with my consent becomes an almost insurmountable challenge.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. I mean, and you've mentioned before that these companies are acquiring different companies. They have all of these multiple systems, and especially with a GLP-1 patient, that is a relationship that spans over months, if not years.
If not decades, we don't know yet.
Right. I guess that'll remain to be seen. But that's a great segue. Transcend recently released a exclusive research report where we surveyed 265 leaders across different industries, and 52% of those respondents said that they were highly reliant on consent data for initiatives like AI and personalization. The other 48% said they were somewhat reliant. So
that's basically everybody is reliant on
100% of...
unless you're building a robot, I think that's all that AI is data. So
right. Yeah. It makes total sense that you don't see 100% often in survey data, but we were not surprised to find that. But it just seems very clear to me that this consent data and having a layer to bring it all together really provides a critical foundation for these things like personalization, data-driven products, etc. So with that in mind, like once you have that foundation, what becomes possible that wasn't possible before?
So that leads to the question of why are pharmaceutical companies trying to go direct to consumer?
Right.
And staying within the GLP space, just as an example. So now that I've said, yes, you can tell me once a week when it's time for me to take my injection, they know what I'm taking and they know how often I'm taking it. And they could have probably asked me the dosage and I probably would have told them, because that way they can make their message to me a little bit better. Oh, I'm taking 0.25 milligrams or whatever.
Right.
And so what happens is, if you're the pharmaceutical company, you're already working on the oral version. And you want the scaling for the oral version. Everybody knows that GLPs, right? It went hockey stick. It was crazy.
Yeah, the growth was exponential.
They want the oral to not be hockey stick, but to literally be a vertical line. And the way they're going to do that is that they're going to talk to patients like me who are using the previous products, and they're going to switch them over because everybody wants to stop giving themselves a weekly injection and just take a pill. And so this creates a kind of flywheel, right? You start a consent event, and then you build trust with your customer. And then when they come to me and say, oh, Aimee, you can stop injecting yourself now, we've got a pill for you. That makes me feel really well disposed to the company again. And so now, that's sort of the second layer of the second turn of the flywheel. And now they may know what age I am because they could have asked me at some point. And so eventually they're going to say, do you want hormone replacement therapy? Do you want, and there's just this continuous decades-long pathway that a pharmaceutical company can make with me. And if you were a healthcare provider doing something like that, imagine what you could do, because they know everything about me. They know all of my symptoms. They know all of my surgeries.
Right.
If the healthcare companies could find a way to harness all of the data that they have access to, hint, they can, but if they did that, now they've got so much more data about me, so many more consent events, and can really get that flywheel churning a lot faster.
Right. And these are messages that, you've been with this provider for so long, and they're in line with what you actually want. Like, as you said, you don't necessarily want to be injecting all the time. So if they come to you offering a pill,
you're like, yay, yes,
sounds great.
Please, thanks. Oh, and a coupon too? Great.
Right.
Right.
So it feels like a win-win.
Yeah. So one of the things that Transcend is doing is building a consent layer that touches and sort of spans across all of that data. Mm-hmm. There's no way in the world that a regular, that a United Health Group, for example, is going to be able to get all of the data that they've been collecting for the last 2 decades and put it into one tidy database the way the pharmaceutical companies are starting to do. Because there's just too much. And at least at United Health Group, which is where I used to be the CISO, they acquire a new company, maybe 2 new companies a month every month. And so the data will never be clean. And so what Transcend has done instead was create a consent fabric that sits over top of all of the data and allows you, when you get a yes, you can use this data. You don't have to go back into the original data store to say, oh, Morgan said yes. But instead, all that consent preference is held on the layer above that. Mm-hmm. Which then enables all of the AI that you want to do. So you've got instant on-the-fly access to consented data, so you can start more flywheels with more customers, including potentially reaching out to them for products that they didn't know they wanted yet.
Right, exactly. So we're keeping it short and sweet today, but I love to end a session on kind of a practical advice moment. I think there's people in this conference and in this audience who are under pressure to ship AI quickly. Everybody wants it, even if they don't know why. What would your advice be to somebody whose data foundation isn't there yet and they know that, but is feeling that pressure from their board, their CEO, et cetera?
Yeah. It's funny. I was a CIO for decades, and you always ask for more money to fix all your systems and to transform the applications. And there's always this sort of, no, we're not ready to do that yet.
Right.
So what I've learned is you can always start small with a project that you know is going to give returns. So you ask for a little bit, and you do something that gives a little bit more. And then you build, it's the flywheel again, right? Then you build on that and you say, look, I gave you those results. Let's do it bigger. So find a use case within your organization that uses data. Again, you don't have to put all the data together. It doesn't need to be tidy. Put a consent layer on top of it, and then find a use case that you know is going to be beneficial both to the user and to the business. Try it out once, adapt it until it works, and then the learnings that you've done from that apply to a larger use case, and then apply to a larger use case. And eventually, that consent layer will be on top of all of your data.
Right. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
Well, that's the end of my questions. We wanted to open it up to the floor if anybody here has a question.
Any questions? Awesome. Thanks for listening, folks.
All
Nice
right.
to meet you all.
Thank you all.